or even its viewers. The information contained in this program is not to be confused with medical or legal advice. An appearance on this platform is not necessarily an endorsement, but as always, we encourage you to do your own research. Enjoy the show. I don't know why there's no music. It's supposed to be playing. Oh, man. Hold on. Yeah, it's definitely set correct. Droids, Avalo. There it is. Okay. Well, for whatever reason, the music doesn't want to play today. That's very strange. All right, guys. Well, listen, do me a favor. Hit that like button. Help us out by sharing the show. We do have a lot to discuss today. We've got so much related to immigration and what the administration is doing to stop that from continuing to go to unimaginable heights. We've got new information about Dr. Anthony Fauci. We've got movement in the Senate. We've got new details on a number of DSA candidates that are rising in the Democrat Party around the United States of America and how people are responding to that. And we are also going to touch on some things related to the COVID jabs. All right, so I guess we're just going to open the show, and I'm going to say welcome back, everybody. I don't know exactly what's going on with the music here. That was certainly unexpected. Hopefully you guys can actually hear me because, of course, that would just be the way if everything wasn't working and I had no idea. I don't know if Independence is out there in the chat, but BDR1776, thank you so much, says finally catching the show from the start. And I'll start off with a $10 challenge. So glad to be here. I'm glad to have you here as well, my friend. All right, so we do have audio in the chat. I guess I'll have to do some troubleshooting later on and see what's going on with OBS. But let us begin by, first of all, bringing up a story that I am so horrified to have to bring you guys. Yesterday, I talked about the dangers that white Afrikaners are under in South Africa. There are, of course, dangers if you are a farmer, if you live out in the bush, but there's a lot more danger if you live in the cities. Now, to be sure, there is a lot of segregation among the whites and the blacks in South Africa. And it's unfortunate, but that's a necessary tool that has to be implemented so that the black South Africans don't just immediately try to kill, maim, murder, and kidnap the white South Afrikaners. Now, that doesn't mean that the security protocols that are in place always work. But generally speaking, you will have neighborhoods that are under close guard. They have deep and very, very compact security protocols that are implemented to try to make sure that people who live in these neighborhoods are safe and protected. However, a young woman was just kidnapped. Her name is she's 26 years old, and her name is Alex Soleil Van Heerden. She was last seen at 1857, so very late at night on Wednesday, the 5th of August. She had just left News Cafe in Rosebank in an Uber, and she was headed to her home. If you are a South African resident, then you might know this, 123 Mimosa Road in Northcliffe, Johannesburg. Now, I researched this area, and it's a predominantly white suburb. It is fairly safe, or at least it's thought to be. But in this instance, Alex got out of her Uber, and the moment she stepped out of her Uber, before she could open up the gate on her compound, a car drove up behind the Uber with 3 men jumping out. You can't see them from the video, but we do have the video. And they forced Alex into a small white car, a Renault hatchback. So the footage and the kidnapping itself was all caught on camera on her own security footage. And this is a fairly brazen kidnapping. She was obviously taken against her will. She has not been seen since then. I don't know if her family has been reached out to, if they've asked for any sort of a ransom or anything. But if you live in South Africa, if you live in Johannesburg, she was last seen wearing a white dress and a jacket. She has no distinctive markings, no tattoos. The person who wrote this post up says this is not a missing person. This is a targeted kidnapping. in a supposedly safe northern suburb, a young woman, an attorney by all accounts, yanked off the pavement in front of her own home while the country pretends that crime is under control. They ask that you share this if you saw anything around Mimosa Road, Northcliffe that evening, any suspicious vehicles, any groups of men hanging around. Contact the investigators immediately, and they give several names and phone numbers for security and police in the area. And they say every hour that passes by is another hour that this young woman is in the hands of animals. South Africa keeps producing these headlines while the same people who created this chaos keep lecturing the world about transformation. So here is Alex. Obviously, she is a beautiful young woman, and unfortunately, I don't have super high hopes for her being found safe. Here, I'm just going to jump ahead to the moment that the Uber arrives. You can see here, I mean, she's got a heavily fortified compound that she lives in, which ostensibly would be thought to be safe. There is a beefy security gate right there. Okay, so here is the Uber pulling in, she's getting out, and then immediately you're going to see this car, a man run up and grab her, and then a Renault will come up and pull up behind them. Looks like maybe they grab her purse or make sure that she's got nothing else left in the vehicle, in the Uber, and then they basically tell the Uber driver to get the hell out. The Renault comes up, they force her in, and she's gone. Just like that. She's gone. Yeah, I don't have high hopes that she's going to be found alive. Because I think that if they intended for her to be alive, I would imagine that her family would have already been contacted for a ransom. And the Uber driver just drives off. I don't know if the Uber driver called the police. I don't have any other information about this. But the video goes on for another 3 minutes, and there's nobody else home. Nobody else comes up to the gate, and just like that, she's gone. This is not super uncommon. Yeah, here is the missing poster for her. They give a number for friends and family. They have a number for the Uber driver, the witness. The local police is the Fairlands Police Station. They give the names of the officers that are handling the case. And they have a picture of the vehicle that abducted her. 26 years old. Alex is believed to have been grabbed by two men after getting out of an Uber at the gate of her apartment complex. And she's gone. So just pray for this young woman. Of course, pray that she's alive. But pray that if she isn't alive, that she's not undergoing some horrific torture or something like that. Yeah, it is really, really awful what is happening to people over there. All right. Let's jump back over to the United States of America. And let me say thank you to No Thanks Joe, who says, hey, Zach, Lisa, good Thursday to you both. Thanks again for your great real investigations and reporting. You do great work. God bless. Be safe, all. God bless you as well. I appreciate it. And then Trump won. Thank you for the cookie. Yeah, that's, you know, I was considering the fact maybe the Uber driver is in on it, or maybe this woman was like under the surveillance of these kidnappers for some time, and they were waiting for an opportunity to come get her. And they saw her pulling up, and they knew maybe she was getting home from work. Maybe she was coming home. Yeah. Okay. The post says the Uber driver drove straight to the police. Okay. I didn't see that in that post, and I didn't read it in the poster, but I was only scanning it. So it's good that he did the right thing. So I'd say probably that he's not involved with it. All right. Now, Mitch McConnell, God bless his immortal soul, he is now discharged from the rehab center. And the people who are running his office in the U.S. Senate have said that he will now continue his recovery and convalescence at home. Norlad V, I saw about 2 seconds of the Perez Hilton video, and that was all I needed to see. As soon as I realized what I was looking at, I did not want to watch any more of it. That was one of the most disturbing things I've ever seen. Have you guys ever seen Event Horizon? It looked like Event Horizon. It looked like Sam Neill at the end of Event Horizon. It was horrible. I didn't talk about it because there's really nothing to say. It looks like Perez Hilton had a psychotic break of some kind, and he went on a TikTok live stream and he mutilated himself, and then he was picked up by the police and he was committed. And just absolutely horrible. So Mitch McConnell has been hospitalized for over a month, since June 14th, after he was found unconscious at his home in Washington, D.C. Well, an announcement was released by his staff saying, in Mitch McConnell's voice, "Earlier today, I was discharged from the rehabilitation center to continue my recovery at home. Elaine and I are grateful for the many well wishes and supporters from friends, colleagues, and Kentuckians, and for the attentive care I've received from excellent doctors, nurses, therapists, and hospital staff." And then Mitch McConnell stared off into the distance for a good 10 minutes before continuing. "On the advice of my doctors, I'll maintain an intensive regimen of physical therapy from home during the state work period, and I'll continue to engage with my staff and colleagues on important Senate business." Still, however, we have no proof of life. At least with Dianne Feinstein, they had the gall to wheel her out in a wheelchair, probably against her will, essentially whispering into her ear and telling her exactly what she was supposed to say when she was in Congress. And every time she biffed it, they would correct her. Anyways, we do have the two photos of Mitch McConnell. If I was a resident of Kentucky, I would expect that my senator would at least post a brief video. We live in the social media age. Okay, show us a video of Mitch McConnell doing physical therapy. Show us a video of Mitch McConnell sitting upright and breathing. Show us a video of Mitch McConnell giving his wife a kiss. Anything, so that you can show that the man is actually alive. This is no longer a high-trust society as far as I'm concerned, okay? I do not trust anything. No longer trust but verify. Just verify. I'm good, okay? I don't trust anybody for anything. So there's also a statement from the Capitol's Office of Attending Physician. Senator McConnell continues his recovery from a fall at home in June. And that's all. Of course, the rumors that McConnell was brain dead or who had undergone some type of a coronary event, his heart had stopped. We haven't gotten proof on any of those things, but, I've never heard of somebody having pneumonia and then needing physical therapy. Anybody here in the chat? I'm not a medical professional, okay? I know we've got some nurses. I know we may have some doctors out there in the chat. Has anybody heard of that being a necessary, follow-up treatment? You have pneumonia and you go to the hospital, you go to rehab after you go to the hospital, and then you have to do physical therapy. Physical therapy is something that happens when you have like an injury, right? Or if you have a stroke and you lose the ability to use a portion of your body. I've seen physical therapy used for a lot of things, but I have never heard of it being used after somebody has a case of pneumonia. Okay? So Conley says, nurse here, yes, especially with the prolonged hospital stay in an elderly patient. He is deconditioned and weak. Okay. All right. I will buy that. If Mitch McConnell, I guess, laid in bed for the last month, he probably would have had some loss of muscle fibers. Definitely needs to, get back to it. He's already weak and infirmed, so I don't know. Anyways, but even if that is the case, Nurse Conley, I still don't buy it. Until I see a video of Mitch McConnell holding up a newspaper and saying something that makes sense about something that is current. I just don't buy it. The people of Kentucky deserve some firm proof of life that Mitch McConnell is more than just a cold, dead corpse. All right, I have a little bit more information for you about the ending of certain aspects of the NFA. Silencer Shop, also Silencer Co. These are the two premier online retailers of suppressors. This is a place that I have shopped myself in the past, and they were actually the ones who initially brought the lawsuit against the ATF. And of course, they were joined by Gun Owners of America, by Silencer Co. They were joined by Palmetto State Armories. They were joined by Firearms Policy Coalition, a number of other organizations. Anyways, they wanted to give a little bit more clarity on exactly where we stand with the NFA and the purchase of suppressors, short-barreled rifles, and short-barreled shotguns. Let's take a listen.
News. The NFA was just ruled unconstitutional. In our lawsuit, Silencer Shop Foundation versus the ATF, we sued the ATF and we won. Here's what this means. Suppressors, SBRs, and SBSs could soon be purchased just like any other firearm. The federal court got rid of the registration requirement. So that means Form 1s, Form 4s, Clio notifications, everything gone. And because we won, you win too. This ruling would apply to all Silencer Shop customers, current and future. One catch though, the court hit pause for 7 days to give the government a chance to appeal, and that could get extended. So today, August 5th, the NFA is still in effect. But hopefully by August 12th, that's no longer the case. But if this holds, buying a suppressor or a short-barreled rifle or short-barreled shotgun could be just like buying any other firearm. No Form 1, no Form 4, no wait period, and no registry. And a huge shout out to everyone that made this lawsuit possible. So thank you for donating to the Silencer Shop Foundation and to our partners on this lawsuit like GOA, SAF, FRAC, Silencer Co., B&T, and PSA. We're breaking this whole thing down piece by piece, so stick with us. Whenever the next move happens, you'll hear it here first.
All right, so on the 12th, as long as the ATF has not challenged this, as long as that 7-day period has elapsed and you're able to just, run up to the store, grab yourself a suppressor, grab yourself an SBR, whatever it might be, I am immediately going to build all of the SBRs that I can because I've got so many parts for different guns that I've purchased as they were on sale over the years, and I've just been gradually putting them together. I've got a couple of different things that I've been waiting to produce because I knew this was coming, and I didn't want to have to go through all the Form 4 and all that jazz because I need to go have new fingerprints put on file with the ATF. I need a new passport photo. So anyways, because I redid my office here, I've got a revised gunsmithing area with an overhead camera. So I am going to film myself doing the builds, and I will put that out on my channel. Or maybe I'll do like another channel like, Red Pill Guns or something like that. Anyways. So, yeah, I'm super stoked, and I'm looking forward to being able to produce and not have to worry about the ATF coming and knocking on my door. All right, so let's take a look at what's going on with Dr. Anthony Fauci. So, as you know, Dr. Anthony Fauci is not happy. He and his wife left the hearing the other day, and he was heard to be bemoaning the position he was put in by the Republican members of Congress. Accountability is right around the corner, and Anthony Fauci has many different things that I believe he can be prosecuted for. He lied. He profited from those lies. He destroyed businesses. He destroyed families. He put people's health at risk. He destroyed a generation of children's developmental abilities, and now his attorney is gaslighting the American public. So, as you know, today was the scheduled vote for the contempt resolution against Anthony Fauci, and Democrats on the committee attempted to table the resolution, which means that they were trying to have a vote that would overrule the Republicans and stop this vote from taking place and moving out of committee. They were blocked, so good stuff. But at the moment that Dr. Anthony Fauci's lawyer was able to comment on this, he put out this statement. So he said, today's partisan committee vote is a crude political stunt intended to punish Dr. Fauci for exercising his constitutional rights. Now, to be fair, I don't know if this is the doctor. The fan is on. Yes, the fan is on. I don't know if this is the doctor that was kicked out of the hearing the lawyer that was kicked out of the hearing. He'd had like 6 of them. All right, so The Senate should reject Senator Paul's meritless and politically motivated contempt resolution. For years, Senator Paul has proclaimed to anyone who would listen that Dr. Fauci should be prosecuted and put in prison. Based. Dr. Fauci has committed no crime, and Senator Paul knows it. That's not true. Dr. Fauci has an unlimited and wide-ranging, absolutely unprecedented federal pardon for a 10-year period. That doesn't mean that Dr. Anthony Fauci committed no crime. If he had committed no crime, why would he even attempt to invoke the Fifth Amendment? Today's resolution is a continuation of Senator Paul's personal vendetta against Dr. Fauci, who spent 50 years in public health and has saved countless lives. It is shameful and wrong that Senator Paul is abusing his power to try to weaponize the Justice Department against an honorable public servant. So it's important to note that Vice President J.D. Vance will now have to sign off on the committee's decision to bypass a full Senate vote so that a referral can be sent to the DOJ. And given the uproar around Anthony Fauci's performance during that committee and President Trump's scathing comments regarding Dr. Anthony Fauci, we can only imagine that J.D. Vance is going to do the right thing. Now, let's take a look at this. What is this? Well, this is yet another entry from Dr. Anthony Fauci's diary. This time, we have an entry from March 4th of 2020. A man by the name of Ezekiel Emanuel sought advice from Anthony Fauci about, get this, whether or not one is immune once they have been exposed to SARS-CoV-2. Remember what they told everybody? That if you got COVID, not only would you most likely die a slow and painful death, and it would be necessary to put you on a ventilator and give you remdesivir, but if you got COVID, then you would not get the natural immunity. They completely ignored the concept of natural immunity or herd immunity. So Dr. Anthony Fauci responded. His response was, yes. In fact, he said you got substantial immunity from being exposed to SARS-CoV-2. The irony here is that this is true. This is the correct answer. But this is not the answer that Anthony Fauci was giving to the American public. So, right here, Ezekiel Emanuel, writing to Dr. Anthony Fauci on his official NIH-NIAID email. He said, sorry, the phone. Is a person likely to be immune once they caught the coronavirus once? Do we know anything about likely drift? And he says no evidence in this regard, but you would assume that there would be substantial immunity post-infection. It is an RNA virus, so you can't expect mutations, but I'm not sure how much it's going on. We'll have to check. So on March 4th, Anthony Fauci told Ezekiel Emanuel, who is the vice provost of global initiatives and the chair in the Department of Medical Ethics and Health Policy at the University of Pennsylvania, that if you were infected with the coronavirus, you could assume that you were going to receive substantial immunity. And of course, if you receive substantial immunity, then what's the point of getting a genetic manipulation shot after the fact? There would be none, except, of course, unless you take into account the very, very generous remunerations that Dr. Anthony Fauci would receive for being the head of the coronavirus response in this desperate time of need. And in an age when we haven't had a pandemic since the Spanish flu of 1917 and coronavirus rears its ugly head and we can only assume that people are going to be dying. Remember, people are dying. Remember the nurses crying and telling people to get vaccinated and wear your mask and stay home, stay 6 feet apart. The crisis actors telling us that if we wanted to live our lives and act in the way that we knew this was going to behave, that there would be no way we would not be complicit in killing our grandparents. Well, guess what? They were the ones who killed our grandparents. They were the ones who killed our parents. They were the ones who killed the children who they convinced the parents that the kids needed to get these genetic modification shots. And those kids that aren't dead, the ones who have to live the rest of their lives with damaged hearts, who may or may not be permanently disabled as a result, all of that is at the feet of Dr. Anthony Fauci. All right, now, the Senate Homeland Security Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations has just announced through Ron Johnson that he obtained a copy of Dr. Anthony Fauci's COVID-era iPhone. Now, that is notable because it will continue its investigation into the federal government's handling of the pandemic and Dr. Anthony Fauci's lies to Congress. So this was confirmed to the Wall Street Journal. Ron Johnson revealed that the Department of Health and Human Services provided a copy of this phone to the committee. He said the Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations has obtained a copy of Dr. Anthony Fauci's phone from HHS. Hopefully, this device will address many of the questions he refused to answer during last week's hearings. Now, I can only imagine what Dr. Anthony Fauci was saying in private on his personal phone as he was sending emails, essentially speaking out of the other half of his mouth, saying things that were wholly at odds with what he was telling the general public and perhaps even the president and other public health officials that he wanted to get one over. Now, Rand Paul also, of course, who is the chairman of the Senate Homeland Security Committee, announced that that committee is going to be holding Dr. Anthony Fauci in contempt, and he also obtained a copy of Dr. Anthony Fauci's phone. We do have the text of his resolution to hold Anthony Fauci in contempt that was released yesterday, and it argues that Anthony Fauci's Fifth Amendment privilege was unsupported as applied to questions pertaining to the period of the pardon, and that Fauci waived his right to claim that privilege as a result of his opening testimony on subject matter pertinent to the questions under inquiry. So let's take a look at Rand Paul very briefly, talking about another thing that we're going to do to make sure that another Anthony Fauci doesn't rear his ugly head in the future. One of the most disgusting things that we learned was that Anthony Fauci was going after cash prizes for the lies that he was telling to the American people. Well, Rand Paul is now filing legislation to ban federal officials from accepting cash prizes like this. They're going to make it illegal for Dr. Anthony Fauci to do what he did. Again, this is another thing you would expect something like this would already be illegal. But these are the types of loopholes that these bureaucrats have worked into the system for themselves so that they can profit off of your suffering and the death of your loved ones.
Status that he cultivated throughout this process?
It's something there should be a law against. No bureaucrat in the federal government should be getting million-dollar prizes. How can we say that doesn't influence their ability to make decisions? So I'm going to be introducing legislation when we come back in September to make it illegal to accept these monetary prizes. If you want to accept a prize and the money goes to charity, maybe we can allow that. But when the money goes into Anthony Fauci's back pocket, that and royalties, the royalties at the very least ought to be publicized and published in a report. But this, I think, just shouldn't happen, period. And we're going to do what we can to make it illegal.
Status.
Yeah, in my opinion, they should not be able to accept any royalties for what they do as well. You're working for the U.S. government. The U.S. government is working on behalf of the American people. Any benefit to the American people or any products that are produced throughout the course of your research as a servant of the public should be for the benefit of the public, not for the benefit of you as an individual. Now, you want to leave government service, you want to take your experience and your knowledge, and you want to go start a business, and you want to develop products outside of your role as a public servant. I have no problem with that. But you should not be able to capitalize on your relationship to exploit the American people for the purposes of enriching yourself. That is absolutely disgusting. So it should be no surprise that the vote to hold Anthony Fauci in contempt has passed, and Rand Paul immediately sent that resolution to the DOJ so that Anthony Fauci could be referred for charges based upon his contempt of Congress. Now, this resolution was passed earlier today. As I said earlier, all Democrats on the committee attempted to table the resolution, but it was able to pass along an 8-5 vote. Rand Paul discussed the upcoming vote in an appearance on Newsmax last night, and I believe we have a clip of that. Actually, no, this is during the vote.
Seeing no other motions, the question is on reporting of an original resolution regarding contempt of Congress. The clerk will call the roll.
Senator Johnson.
Yes.
Senator Langford.
Aye.
Senator Scott.
Yes.
Senator Hawley.
Aye.
Senator Moreno.
On behalf of the millions of people harmed by Anthony Fauci, resoundingly yes.
Senator Ernst. Senator Moody. Senator Peters.
No.
Senator Hassan.
No.
Senator Blumenthal. No. Senator Fetterman.
Now, don't get it twisted. I think John Fetterman may love Israel so much that he's going to leave the Democrat Party, but that does not align him with us. And even if he switches teams and becomes leaves the Democrat Party and becomes a Republican, that doesn't mean that he's going to be a reliable Republican vote or a reliable American vote. Senator Fetterman, you saw him in that hearing, and he confronted Fauci about being told that the lab leak was not a right-wing talking point and that he was led astray. But even still, that was not enough to have him vote with Republicans, which was actually voting with the American people. He still voted along party lines and voted to not hold Anthony Fauci in contempt when he clearly, like by any measure of the definition, acted in contempt of Congress. He attempted to obstruct a congressional investigation into crimes that he committed. At the same time, he had a universal pardon. So do not look at John Fetterman and start getting stars in your eyes. I see people doing this online, and it's like people are too easily swept up in the celebrity and the hero worship of fallible men. And please, I love you guys too much. Don't do this.
Senator Kim. No. Senator Gallego.
No by proxy.
Senator Slotkin.
No by proxy.
Senator Paul.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, on the vote of those present, the yeas are 8, the nays are 5. On the vote by proxy and for the record only, the yeas are 0, the nays are 2. On this vote, the yeas are 8, the nays are 5, and the motion is agreed to.
Okay, so when Rand Paul discussed this and he mentioned that he was going to be sending this immediately, he said there is some legal discussion and casework and precedent on this. And so we will put this forward. We will make our arguments. If it passes out of committee tomorrow, and it has, which I hope it will, I will immediately send it to the Department of Justice and ask them to continue proceedings to come down with an indictment. There is not a lot of precedent for this, but it isn't law, so there isn't any exact procedure that it has to follow. It's a referral. It's a recommendation. Well, let me just say this. The precedent was set by the Biden administration and Merrick Garland when they held Peter Navarro and Steve Bannon in contempt of Congress for refusing to testify, when they actually did have the right of executive privilege. They had more of a right to decide to not testify before those committees than Dr. Anthony Fauci did. So the precedent that was set by Merrick Garland, Anthony Fauci must be prosecuted. Paul made this post on X right after the vote. He said, passed by Republicans on behalf of the millions of Americans and their families still affected years after the COVID pandemic, the resolution to hold Fauci in contempt of Congress has passed out of the Senate Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee by a vote of 8-5. Hold on, I want to make sure there's nothing else. No, that was the end of the post. All right, so as I said earlier, J.D. Vance now has to sign off on the committee's decision. That will allow it to bypass a full Senate vote and have a referral sent directly to the DOJ. So now Dr. Anthony Fauci is in a holding pattern, and so are we. We're waiting to see. You know what? And here's the thing. This is the really unfortunate thing, is that we don't have Todd Blanche as the Attorney General yet. If there is some form of obstruction that's going to come from other Republicans in the Senate because they believe that Dr. Anthony Fauci shouldn't be prosecuted, then again, I fully expect for President Trump to withdraw Todd Blanche's nomination. As far as I know, there has not been a vote today. Originally, that's what was scheduled. So we'll see what's going to happen. Now, yesterday, we commented on John Solomon's story that apparently Tom Cotton and John Thune are actually blocking the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence from sending over the transcripts of John Brennan's testimony to numerous Senate subcommittees, and that Todd Blanche was not allowing it. So, and I speculated, maybe this has something to do with his confirmation. However, Todd Blanche actually commented on this today, and he said, "We appreciate the cooperative relationship we have with Leader Thune and Chairman Cotton and the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence. There is no daylight here, and suggestions to the contrary are ill-informed. We look forward to continue working productively together." So this could either be, 100% accurate and the information John Solomon was given is not correct. I do, however, believe that Solomon is in direct contact with Joe DeGeneva, but it also could just be Todd Blanche glazing members of the Senate that he knows he needs their votes before they can go ahead and deep six it. So again, if with regard to Todd Blanche becoming the Attorney General, we are also in a holding pattern. It seems to be the way the Senate does business, which is to say, no business at all. All right, now let's talk about some of the primary elections that happened over the last couple of days. We had a number of DSA candidates unseat establishment Democrats and work their way in. Now, this is undeniably bad for the establishment Democrat Party, but it is also, I believe, good for people who understand the dangers that communism brings to the United States of America. Now, somebody like Chuck Schumer, he is a slave to votes. He's a slave to public opinion. And he's a slave to the people in his party who would unseat him. So as the top-ranking Democrat, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer is basically running away as the DSA, the Democratic Socialists of America, take over his party. If they do, Chuck Schumer is going to be one of the first people who's going to be put out of his misery. But yesterday, he fielded questions from a number of reporters during his weekly press conference, and he was asked directly about his party's DSA wing, and he just dodged the question. So a reporter asked about the Michigan Senate primary, which was held just this week, and the fact that DSA-backed candidate Abdul El-Sayed beat Schumer-backed Haley Stevens. She was also the most highly funded candidate by AIPAC. AIPAC put, I think, $30 million into her campaign alone. And El-Sayed is the guy who has deep terrorist ties. He has homes in multiple countries around the world. He's a total Democrat socialist. He's a fake doctor. He has claimed to be a doctor, but he never actually took the exam to become a doctor. And El-Sayed also has denied that he's a socialist. But, I mean, all you got to do is look at his policy positions and the things that he said and the things that he's written over the years. And he's been to a number of DSA events. He's also backed by Hassan Piker, who is like America's communist darling podcaster, who is still under investigation by the government. So, in regards to being a democratic socialist, El-Sayed said in an interview, "I'm not technically or practically DSA. I am not somebody who is a socialist. I believe in capitalism. I just believe that capitalism has to be regulated. It's already regulated. That's the system that we live under." What he really means is that he wants to take the means of production and put them into the hands of the plebs. He wants to put it into the hands of the workers. He wants to reevaluate our capital system. He's also been described as a longtime friend of the Detroit Democrat Socialists of America. That was during a 2019 event when he was photographed with another socialist, Representative Rashida Tlaib. Now, Schumer responded to the question about the DSA taking over the Democrat Party in a sort of typical waffling, non-answer politician's way, as you would expect. Okay, so Chuck calls on what will be the last questioner.
Go ahead.
In Michigan, I know you endorsed Haley Stevens, but if Al-Sayed wins this primary, will you endorse the winner of the primary?
Bottom line, we are going to win Michigan, take back the Senate, and have a majority. And Manu.
Thank you. Is the rise of the DSA good for your party?
Look, we are a big tent party. And being a big tent party is a strength, not a weakness.
Leader Schumer.
Thank you.
Yes, and now he has to run away. Now, last week he was also asked about DSAs and their plans to abolish the Senate. This is part of their platform. The reporter could even finish her question as Schumer walked away awkwardly, cutting her off. Look, the bottom line is Democrats from one end of the spectrum to the other are going to be working to defeat Trump, to bring down costs, to go after his corruption, and to end the chaos, he said. All right, so just keep in mind, if Chuck Schumer denigrates the DSA, they will automatically lose support. He will automatically lose support because, of course, he needs to depend on people in the Democrat Party who consider themselves to be socialists. 34% of the Democrat Party believes that they are socialists themselves. But, of course, also, if he supports the DSA, then he runs the risk of himself being made irrelevant and being put out of a job. If the Democratic Socialists of America seize control of the United States of America, all bets are off. The structure of this nation will be like indelibly altered in a way that you can't even possibly fathom. This will not be the United States any longer. The Senate will be abolished, and they will take total control of the means of production and the money.
The Democratic Socialists of America recently released their new platform. One of the things in that platform is to abolish the Senate and create a new unicameral House in Congress. Is this something Democratic Socialist candidates have been winning in races across the country? Is this something that has a place, this type of policy position in the
The
Democratic
bottom line is Democrats from one end of the spectrum to the other are going to be working to defeat Trump, to bring down costs, to go after his corruption, and to end the chaos.
And, of course, once again, another tin can response. I'm sure he's got a one sheet. If you're asked about the DSA, you've got to give like a very generic answer because we don't want to run the risk of alienating that huge portion of the voting base. They need them if they're going to win. And that may come into play when we get to the general election. Michigan is an open state, okay? So it means you can go ahead and vote for whomever you want to. All right, now, we've also learned that on Tuesday night, there were several primary elections in key states across the country where there was likely shenanigans taking place. One of those states was Virginia. In one polling location in Old Town Alexandria, it was open during early voting. For some reason, they mysteriously closed it down on Election Day, which is, of course, the most important day of the primary cycle. If a voter who lives in this area expects that a polling location will be open on Election Day, they may plan their entire schedule about getting to that polling station with just enough time to vote, especially in a modern world where people may work very long hours. They may work overtime. They may work more than one job. They may be forced to vote based upon some very specific and stringent circumstances. So these events are fairly recent because this polling location was open earlier in this year during the vote for the Virginia redistricting referendum. The polling location also doubles as the Alexandria voter registration office, and it's across the street from the Alexandria City Hall, which is undergoing heavy renovations. So this would be a location you would expect would be open. Now, they're saying that it was open for early voting, but on Election Day, there was a big sign that said this location is not a polling site on Election Day, which implies that it couldn't have been open for voting at all. So the question is, why did they close it? So what if Election Day is the only day that some people come out to vote? What if there are some people who could only vote at the last minute? As I said, you worked until 6:30 and you drive immediately to your polling location. There were apparently a couple of locals who were attempting to vote at the same polling location that day, and the Gateway pundit spoke with them. None of them wanted to go on the record because, of course, this is a modern, crazy world that we live in. But one of these locals informed the Gateway pundit that this polling location had been moved a couple of blocks away. So the new location was the Lyles Crouch Traditional Academy. It's an elementary school in Alexandria. Now, the locals had received an email notification at some point in the past that this location was being moved elsewhere. But what if people didn't check their emails? I get hundreds of emails a day. I don't look at all of them. I simply can't. A lot of it's junk. I also have like 10 email addresses. So what about somebody like that? What if they had no idea? So the locals also confirmed that they had come to that exact same polling location on the general election day last year in 2025. And the sign telling people that the location would not be available on election day didn't say anything about the fact that there was going to be a new location. This, to me, appears to be some type of voter suppression manipulation. There was no additional directions. There was no location for the alternate location. There was a QR code that would help voters in the area determine another polling location. But what if somebody doesn't use a smartphone? What if they show up and they don't have the ability to even use that QR code? What if they have a smartphone and it's dead? So the issue relying on the QR code is one that is, I find to be very ironic, because they tell us that using your identification, being asked to prove your identity or your citizenship on election day is racist. They tell us that black people don't have driver's licenses. Well, is it reasonable to assume that if black people can't figure out how to get a driver's license, maybe they also can't figure out how to get a smartphone? Is that racist? Is that classist? Is that something that you would expect the proletariat to be able to do, or with the plebs and the elite? Would they all have the same opportunities? I don't know. I don't know about that, but I find it to be highly suspicious. Now, I wanted to tell you about this Democrat Socialist of America candidate in Colorado. She's actually born in Ethiopia. Her name is Malat Kiros, and she's open, very open about her socialist leanings. She's actually said that there is nothing more American than socialism. That's a real quote that came from her mouth. So she's running for Congress in Colorado, and she appeared on a PBS show called Firing Line, and she tried to argue that socialism is American. She comes off as a campus radical because that's exactly what she is. She spent a couple of years in college as a professional student. She was born in Ethiopia, and like many other DSA radicals who were not born in this country but got naturalized, she basically got here like a couple of weeks ago, essentially, in the scale of things. But she believes she's got the right to go to Congress and decide for natural-born American citizens what their God-given constitutional rights are and what will best serve them once she is ruling over them. There is nothing more American than socialism, and it has proven to deliver life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That is what congressional candidate Malat Kiros asserted during this PBS interview. She believes there should be a trans Bill of Rights, made the declaration during that recent interview, and she staunchly defended socialism, asserting it has delivered on the ideas outlined in the founding documents of the United States. Could not be further from the truth, but let's continue. She said, I don't think there's anything more American than subscribing to an economic philosophy that, as the evidence shows, is the only one that's actually capable of delivering things like life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I really can't. You know what else I can't do is point to a successful socialist country who has delivered any of these things individually. But she continued, the reporter asking her the questions said, socialism has proven to deliver on the values of the Declaration of Independence more than capitalism has? Yeah, she declared. You know, when we talk about capitalism, one of the things that folks talk about with capitalism as a theory is that it's responsible for, delivering people out of poverty here in the U.S. Well, that's not the entire story, but let's actually hear it from the horse's mouth.
I don't think there's anything more American than subscribing to an economic philosophy that, as the evidence shows, is the only one that's actually capable of delivering things like life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I really can't think of anything else.
Socialism has proven to deliver on the values of the Declaration of Independence more than capitalism has.
Yeah. You know, when we talk about capitalism, you know, one of the things that folks talk about with capitalism is a theory is that it's responsible for, you know, delivering people out of poverty here in the U.S.
More people out of poverty around the world than any other economic system. Yeah.
Yes, which isn't the entire story. At the same time that a lot of folks were getting delivered out of poverty, there were a lot of social safety programs that were also being created at the same time. A lot of fair labor laws that were being enacted. You know, rights that workers were taking back to make sure that they were not working in unsafe conditions, to make sure that they were earning fair wages. That is not capitalism, right? Unfettered capitalism is where the capitalists, the owners of the means of production, are the only ones that are calling the shots. And you are lucky to have the job, and you just have to deal with the conditions. Socialism is about delivering democracy in the workplace and making sure that workers have a say about the conditions that they're working in, about negotiating for the kind of wage that would be fair for the labor that they are contributing to whatever industry it is that they're working in. And I also think that, you know, when folks think of capitalism, I think they think of free markets and competition and, you know, innovation. And
what do you think of?
I think of monopolies.
Wow. So, yeah, denaturalize and deport. That is the only thing that comes to mind when I see this woman. I mean, history is rife with examples about how socialism and communism does not deliver anything but misery to the people who live under it. And, of course, the people at the top of the food chain, those in control, they get all of the wonderful things. They get the good food, they get the nice houses, they get the good cars. Whereas the people at the bottom, each according to his means and each according to his ability, whatever it was that Karl Marx said, you work as much as you possibly can, and you only get what the state is willing to dole out. So there's no innovation. There's no reason to do anything more than the bare minimum. Thank you to Untamed Nation for rating the stream. Also, thank you to Patty Ninefingers. I do remember the TikTok videos when the hospitals were in danger of being swamped. Sure, I remember all that stuff, too. Yeah, and Seven Rick Rock, I agree with you on the AutoPen. I think the AutoPen completely invalidates all of those pardons that were signed by it. But again, in order to test that as a legal theory, we have to have a DOJ that's in a position to do so. And the only way that can happen is if Todd Blanche is officially the Attorney General, because then he's no longer in any danger of having to go through a confirmation process. But if the confirmation process doesn't pan out, President Trump has said that he's going to withdraw Blanche's name and then just keep him as the interim Attorney General, at which point I believe that he would be free to test that legal theory. There's a lot of legal theories I think that we should be testing right now, but again, we're in a holding pattern. All right, now, Zoran Mamdani, New York's own Democrat socialist, was at an event in New York City the other day. He went to an event that was held in Long Island. It was related to the NYPD and crime, and he quite literally got booed off the stage. So he was on this campaign trip going through all 5 boroughs the other night, handing out proclamations, posing for selfies, touting record low shootings and murders, alongside the police commissioner, and, of course, just trying to do anything and say anything that he could to make the people of New York City believe that his administration is going to be successful. Of course, this is right before we're going to have a mass exodus of people leaving New York City. Why would you want to live or work in New York City if you are going to have a substantial tax bill that's going to be coming up here very shortly? There aren't enough cops in New York City. Of course, we know these people want to defund the police. They don't want to adequately have law enforcement on hand because that creates chaos that allows for crime and murders and robberies to go up. And then, of course, that creates the need for government to step in and do something akin to a communist government. So he showed up, and he quite literally got booed off the stage. So listen to this, your moment of zen.
Ladies and gentlemen, are you ready for some more dancing? See, oh, no, we're not. No, we're not. No, we're not. We're getting awards. Somebody's getting an award. You want to see who's getting an award? Come on, guys. I want some energy here.
So it's perhaps difficult to make out, but many of the people are giving thumbs down and saying boo to get Zohran Mamdani off of the stage. Now, I mentioned the Senate race between Haley Stevens and Abdul Al-Sayed in Michigan. It was a close race, 1%, as they tend to be. But this Democrat socialist has now placed the Democrats of Michigan into a position where they must be forced to either vote for a radical Muslim socialist or vote for a Republican. It sounds like the 60-some% of Michigan Democrats who are not Democrat socialists are now suggesting they would be more likely to vote for Mike Rogers, the Republican, than to vote for Abdul Al-Sayed because they understand that communism is bad. The 34% that believe themselves to be Democrat socialists, that's probably the younger generation. The 56% that are not Democrat socialists are probably older and more experienced Democrat voters who perhaps, like progressive policies, but also are old enough to remember what it was like when communism was a real thing and the United States was embroiled in a Cold War. Take a listen to this.
Spent 11-1 in this primary race. Republicans now see that as more winnable. This is the candidate they wanted. They're going to throw a ton of money at this to try to flip this seat. So I think people who are looking at this, particularly some Democrats who I've talked to, who are hoping that he will moderate some of his positions. I think one of the key ones to point to that he is not going to, you just heard him talking about Israel, and I want to tell you really quickly, as I was getting on the plane this morning, a guy who was a big fan of MS Now said to me, I'm anxious to see who wins. And I said, oh, did you vote? And he said, yes, I voted for Haley Stevens. And I said, oh, why? And he said, well, because of Israel, and I don't like the position that Abdul Al-Sayed has on Israel. And in fact, if he wins, I will be voting for Mike Rogers. And you could not get more far apart, right, from two candidates than Mike Rogers and even Haley Stevens. But it's going to be interesting to listen to that because this has been a primary conversation within this campaign. A campaign, though, that they clearly are celebrating. They have won. But let's be clear, while this is a...
So the only question will be, is the voters' self-preservation in Michigan strong enough that they will vote against Islamofascism? And I don't know. Because take a look at this. This is crazy. But President Trump endorsed a candidate in Michigan's 8th congressional district, Amir Hassan. Okay? That name was enough for people to not vote for him. Amir Hassan is a black guy. He's a Christian. But with a name like Amir Hassan, people looked at him and thought it was another Barack Obama situation. President Trump endorsed him. And as we've seen in many instances, Trump's endorsement is enough for the base to just vote for whomever he says they should vote for. But in this instance, enough people did not vote for Amir Hassan because people believed with that name he must have been a Muslim. Now, the guy who won is a guy named Tom Smith. Tom Smith actually dropped out of the GOP primary after Amir Hassan was able to retain President Trump's endorsement. But he dropped out too late, and that meant that his name still remained on the ballot. And as such, enough people did not trust that Amir Hassan was who he said he was and didn't believe that Donald Trump's endorsement was enough to gain his vote. So roughly 50.43% of the people in this district voted for Tom Smith. 33.2% voted for Hassan. and then 16.38% voted for Lemo. Lemo is who Smith had endorsed after he dropped out of the race. Take a listen. Well, this is when Amir Hassan received President Trump's endorsement. Trump even posted it on Truth Social.
Raised in Flint, Michigan, the birthplace of General Motors. Son of a father, a grandfather, a grandmother, an aunt, an uncle that all work for General Motors. Son of an educator.
Will to Push Forward says, why didn't people learn more about Hassan prior? Because the unfortunate truth is that most voters are low information voters. And they don't go, like, you guys are different, okay? We are different. We're researchers. We're seekers, all right? We're going out there and we're doing the work and we're trying to get as much information as we can. I'm not just going to vote for somebody because of a name on a ballot. But the sad truth is that most people do. And that spans across both parties.
Protecting America, getting back to the fundamentals and the foundation that made us great in the beginning, that's what we're doing this cycle.
Now, you can see here there were some comments on President Trump's post. Kofefe Truth Seeker on Truth said, I don't trust anyone with a Muslim name. Get them out of the country. Again, not only is Hassan an American by birth, but he's also a Christian. He's not a Muslim. And then Billy says, his name gives me pause. Call me racist, but I'm merely being cautious. Obama comes to mind. Again, Kimberly says, Amir Hassan, why do we want foreigners in office? And he was an American citizen who is a Christian.
It's great in the beginning. That's what we're doing this cycle. The contrast is clear. The time is now. If you love America, make noise. If you believe in first responders, make some noise.
And a strict constructionist says Islam is not compatible with the ideals of the United States of America. Agreed.
You back our military, make some noise. And if you're proud to be a conservative.
Billy also says a Muslim cannot be trusted to speak the truth. Taqiyya is their moral duty. Even if one professes to be a Christian, they cannot be believed.
Born and raised in Flint, Michigan.
All right, so it's a sad thing. Now, Tom Smith, he appears to be an America First, Trump supporter. So, maybe he'll be great for this district. Here is Amir Hassan. He posted on X the next day. This is his reaction to it. And I got to give this guy credit, okay? He is remarkably stoic.
Hey, good morning, everybody. I fell short last night. I make no excuse. It was a tough race. But over the last year, I've had some incredible dealings with people across the entire district. I've learned the issues that we are going through and are facing, and it's just strengthened my resolve. I always speak about conservative values, and the biggest conservative value is we don't make excuses. We see an obstacle and we figure out a way to overcome it. And this is no different. I know what God has in store for me. It's something greater, even if I can't see it right now and I don't understand. But I was reminded to lean not on my own understanding, but that of the Lord. And so that's what I'll do. So to all the winners yesterday, congratulations. I'm very excited for the top of our ticket, and we will get out and vote. Thank you. I look forward to seeing you again, and it's still time to flip the 8th.
Man, yeah, you could tell he was emotional. I mean, I've run for office before. I can tell you it doesn't feel good when you lose, especially when you come close, and I came even closer than he did. It was obvious that, he was, he was on the verge of tears. So,
hey, good morning, everybody.
I just want to give him props. Good job. It sucks that that's what his name is, but what's he going to do? I mean, like, that's what his name is. I feel like if he would have changed his name, people would have attacked him and said, what are you hiding? So anyways, also in Michigan, Shri Tanadar, probably the biggest lol cow in the House of Representatives also lost to a Democrat socialist. Shri Thanedar is the guy who had the animal research lab. He was found to be abusing beagles and then shut down the lab because people figured out what he was doing. And then he basically left the dogs to starve. He is no longer going to be in his seat in Congress. He's got a hairpiece, and he has eyebrows tattooed on, which are just like comical. I've seen plenty of people get very tasteful cosmetic tattoos. This is not one of them. So anyways, Shri Thanedar also lost his Democrat primary in Michigan to State Representative Donovan McKinney. McKinney is 34 years old, and he won the backing of a number of prominent progressives. You can read socialists across the state and country. And he secured this latest victory for the faction mounting an intra-party insurgency against the Democrat establishment. He is a state lawmaker, Democrat socialist, running on a progressive platform, which includes Medicare for all, putting new restrictions on military aid to Israel, and pushing massive investments in sectors like clean energy and housing. All of these things, I'm not even concerned about the DSA candidates unseating these sort of establishment Democrat candidates, because I think that it will be good overall for people to take a look and really recognize what the issues are that these people are running on. And you got to look at this stuff and determine, is this truly what you want for America? I don't think the majority of people want this stuff for America. But Thanedar used to be a DSA-aligned candidate. He was actually expelled from the local chapter back in 2023 because he is such a clown. He is a joke in Democrat circles. He has tried to impeach President Trump more times than anybody else in Congress. Every time he goes on TV, it's humiliating. He can barely speak English. And, of course, there is the testing of drugs on innocent beagles that he left to die in a facility after he closed it down. He formerly owned a pharmaceutical testing lab in New Jersey. It was called Anna Klein Preclinical Services, and it was shut down in 2010. And reports confirm that 118 lab-tested beagles were rescued from this facility. Not only that, but also a whole bunch of monkeys were there. They were just left behind in their cages without food or water. It was horrific. And USA Today described this scene at the time. Day after day, month after month, year after year, they were confined to plexiglass crates, fed and watered on precise schedules, kept clean, but with no opportunity to leave their solitary little boxes and spend time with others like themselves, with nothing but the most antiseptic contact with humans and no time outside the gleaming, climate-controlled facility. The 118 beagles, lab dogs, used to test drugs and pharmaceuticals, displayed nothing of the much-acclaimed beagle characteristics: joyful, noisy, and curious. The USDA inspection reports from 2009 showed multiple previous federal violations by Thanedar's company. Even worse, Thanedar's legal team also sought to sell the innocent animals to recover corporate debt. Thanedar got a much-delayed version of karma from a political standpoint, and it's too bad that he won't be seeing the inside of a jail cell. Oh, he also married a white woman to gain citizenship, and she mysteriously committed suicide after he successfully became an American citizen. What's that about? Definitely something that gives me pause when I think about Shri Thanedar. And I wanted to play a clip of Shri Thanedar because if you've never seen him speak, then I've shown so many clips of him before. But let's go ahead and do this. Shri Thanedar. Shri Thanedar, Shri Thanedar. Okay, here he is. Here he is at an anemic campaign stop begging people to vote for him.
But they talk about my hair. They talk about my hair. They talk about my appearance. They talk about where I was born. They talk about everything, my looks. They talk about my age. They talk about why I should be deported back to the country where I was born.
Just say it. Where were you born, Shri?
They talk about my past business dealings and they distort my business record. They do everything, but they...
Shri Thanedar also was remarkably uneducated on the district that he represented. There was a clip that I played a couple of years ago where he was asked to name a single neighborhood in the district that he represented in Michigan, and he couldn't tell you anything about it. So Thanedar was essentially always going to have this happen to him. He was a terrible person. Also, let me see. E. Heights asks over on YouTube, what were they tested for? What chemicals were they given? Whatever the highest bidder asked to be tested on them. Pharmaceuticals and chemicals that would be used in personal care products. So it could literally have been anything. Emerald Dragon says, Zach, I'm not mad. I'm just disappointed. How can you even stand to say Shri Thanedar or whatever without an Indian accent? Oh, my God, you're right. Shri, because I don't do an Indian accent very well. Shri Thanedar. They talk about my looks. They talk about my accent. That's about as good as I can get. Principal Enigma says, you're locking up. The stream is currently frozen. Is anybody else experiencing that? Because I'm looking over here on Rumble and it appears to be just fine. So I don't know if it's me or if it's you. But what I will say is if you seem to have some form of issue with the stream, go ahead and reboot your browser, refresh it. Make sure that you are not using a million tabs. It looks like everybody else is good, so it must be you, Principal Enigma. All right. Now, one of the biggest issues that we've been talking about in recent months as we were coming up to these primary elections in Michigan and other Democrat-controlled areas is the question of election security, election integrity, the voter rolls, and the DOJ sent a number of teams to some of the largest areas that we have confirmed fraud has taken place in the state of Michigan. So Detroit's elections chief confirms in this clip that the Trump DOJ had teams on the ground monitoring these polling locations during the Michigan primary elections. Don't forget, the Secretary of State received a letter from the Department of Justice and Harmeet Dillon letting them know that if illegal aliens or non-citizens or dead people cast ballots in this election, then the election overseers of Michigan would be held criminally responsible. So apparently, 4 teams of 2 DOJ officials were keeping a close eye on 5 different sites throughout the day. Let's go ahead and listen.
Just before we go very quickly, the Department of Justice is here. They have said, you tell me, what do you know about the Department of Justice that's been sent by the Trump administration this year? What are they doing? What are they saying? What do you know about the people that are here monitoring elections?
Real simple. We got a letter from the Department of Justice about a couple of months ago saying that they were going to be here at the Department of Elections during the August 4th election. We met with them. They said they were sending 4 teams of 2. They were here today. They visited about 5 sites, and there were no issues. There were no issues in terms of provisional voting, or there were no issues in voter-assisted terminal.
What did they do?
No interactions whatsoever. They monitored. They observed. They did not interact with any of our voters. They introduced themselves to our poll workers. They signed in accordance to the agreement that we made with the Department of Justice a couple of days ago when we met them via Zoom. So there weren't any issues. There were no controversies or confrontations. They did their job, we did our job, and we're moving forward.
So now the only question is, what did they find? What did they find? And what are they going to be doing now that the election has taken place? I don't expect anything to happen immediately. However, if there was any findings that are going to be used, then, of course, in the coming weeks, I would expect something to be announced. Now, let's take a look at some of these FBI documents that were recently released in the Oxford, investigation. So this is a note from an FBI case agent who was working on the General Flynn investigation. And he called BS on Mueller and his team, which included Andrew Weissman, and what they were doing in 2017. Remember, they always said we're doing this by the book. That was Comey, that was McCabe, that was all of these people. They were using the excuse of doing this by the book, or at least putting it in writing, because they knew that they weren't. Of course, Susan Rice, her famous memo from Barack Hussein Obama, that the investigations into Trump must be by the book. Prosecutors in the case of the special counsel's investigation were preparing the search warrants, not the investigators. That is a breach of protocol. They basically would create a search warrant for somebody that they wanted to be searched, and then they would just ask an FBI agent to sign it. So there was no real investigation. So Barnett says the appointment of the special counsel's investigation changed everything. Mueller was leading the SCO. Search warrants were being drafted and executed on a regular basis. Attorneys in the SCO were very aggressive and were directing things. Barnett described the SCO situation as upside down, with attorneys drafting search warrants and getting agents to simply act as affiants. Barnett thought that there was a get Trump attitude by some at the SCO. We know there was. Barnett said the get Trump attitude was exhibited in two ways. Barnett referred to incidents involving Trump which were taken in the most negative manner, or in some cases simply misinterpreted. As an example, Barnett described comments made by Trump that investigators needed to, quote, get to the bottom of a matter. Redacted, one of the SCO attorneys, perhaps Weissman, said Trump wanted to, quote, cover it up. Barnett corrected Weissman, saying, no, he said get to the bottom of it. As another example, Barnett said the firing of FBI Director Comey was interpreted as obstruction when it could just as easily have been done because Trump did not like Comey and wanted to replace him. Barnett said, redacted. We don't have the rest of it. But it just goes to show you how deep the corruption went. We all know this, and we've all seen it firsthand for years at this point. All right, now, J.D. Vance is in Washington, D.C. Now that, of course, the Senate has not acted on the Save America Act and they can't force the cleaning of the voter rolls before the upcoming general election. I don't know why he couldn't get to D.C. before that date elapsed, the 4th or the 5th, but here he is. Early this morning, he announced that he was going to the Senate GOP. He was going to be meeting so that he could push them to pass the Save America Act along with a number of other Trump priorities. Now, let's go ahead and listen to what JD said this morning.
The entire Trump administration's priority is to actually get the Save America Act passed. We have the proudest and in some ways the oldest democracy anywhere in the world. 250 years we just celebrated, and yet if you vote in California, you're lucky if a month after the election day, your vote has actually been counted. We know that we have in certain jurisdictions illegal aliens who are casting ballots. We know that 80+% of the American people want you to show a voter ID in order to vote, and yet there are a lot of big blue states that make that impossible, will in fact criminalize the act of asking for an ID in order to vote. Why would you criminalize asking for an ID in order to vote unless you wanted to encourage and promote cheating? So this is an important priority for the administration, but more importantly, it's an important priority for the American people to save our elections. The way you save America is by bringing election integrity. It's something that matters. It's a shame that the Democrats aren't going to help us get this done, given that a majority of Democrat voters actually want us to have election integrity in this country. But we've got a good piece of legislation to support the troops, support the farmers, and get Save America Act passed. This, of course, is the first step, but it's an important step. We're going to take it together. We're going to be successful, and we're going to keep on working at it from there. Thank you.
Now, of course, J.D. Vance could have forced this to happen sooner. But as I've said before, I think that the administration laid a trap for these Democrat bureaucrats in these jurisdictions where they refused to hand over the information. If they had forced the cleaning of the voter rolls prior to this midterm primary, then, of course, they wouldn't have been able to catch them doing what they have accused them of most likely doing, which is allowing illegals, allowing dead people, allowing non-citizens to cast ballots. Also, as I've said before, President Trump may also be forcing a national security emergency with regard to the elections. So We don't know. All of this is speculation. But now that J.D. Vance is there to put the pressure on them, Senate Majority Leader John Thune finally says it's time to hold Democrats accountable for opposing the Save America Act, and he hopes to get a floor vote on SAVE because recess is set to begin this weekend. Let's hear from the head rhino himself.
On the floor of the U.S. Senate.
We're hoping to achieve that, Bill. We've had 5 votes on it already. We will, if we can, we'll figure out a way to get yet another vote on the Save America Act, but I don't expect the Democrats to change their view. The issue here is all 47 Democrats, all 5 times we're voting on the Save America Act on the floor of the United States Senate have voted no. This is an issue about going after Democrats, making this an issue in the fall campaigns and holding them accountable for being on the wrong side of an 80-20 issue with the American people. But we will try and set up a way to get more votes on that, to put them on the record again. But the fact of the matter is, you have block opposition from Democrats in the United States Senate when it comes to this issue. And that's why it's so important that we elect more Republicans to the Senate in November.
All right, that wasn't a yes, so I'll take it for what it is for now. Last question.
All right, so yeah, Kitsko, Usha just had the baby, but JD has been out doing things, okay? It's not like he has only been at home watching over his wife and his new child. So my point here is that he could have, and I believe that it's calculated that he didn't. Now, we do now have confirmation that Thune is putting elements of the Save America Act voter ID on the Senate floor. Now here, Ron Johnson says on Benny Johnson's show, Leader Thune just filed cloture on what I thought was a brilliant bill passed by the House. It's a ban on stock trading by members of Congress combined with voter ID. What's brilliant about it is that when we had the Save America Act on the floor, all these Democrats, now they're lying through their teeth, I'm sure, but they said, we're for voter ID. We're just opposed to this bill. So it'll be interesting to see. Are Democrats going to go to the vote against banning stock trading by members of Congress, but also include voter ID, which they all said they would support? Both of those issues are things they claim to support. It'll be interesting to see, are Democrats going to vote against it? So the one vote might solve an awful lot of these problems and really do probably a better job of what we need in terms of voter ID. Otherwise, we will also have the plan to at least proceed on the reconciliation package. But even there, understand what most of the reconciliation package is. It's a vehicle for doing election integrity. So there are multiple ways they are bringing the Save America Act to the House, to the Senate floor to force a vote on it. And perhaps now that you've got J.D. Vance there putting that pressure on, if for any reason they don't do it, as we've said before, there's always the possibility that J.D. Vance may just take control of the Senate and force this to happen. Lee Walden says, time for me to share how proud and grateful I am for you and yours. You always bring the light, the good, bad, indifferent, your dedication and honest reflection of today's events. Make my day. USCG. Happy. Yeah. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it, Sailor. Also, Freya and the boys says, I have 6 white. You have 6 white German Shepherds? I didn't know yet. I just knew about Freya. I notified them this morning that due to the Holocaust and their potential involvement, that they are being sold for scientific experiments. $5 challenge. All right. Now, we have new information on the strange and long ongoing saga of GBI Strategies. We've known previously that they were operating in a number of different locations throughout Michigan, but it turns out that there were 68 cities where GBI Strategies was faking voter registrations and then sending them in to local clerks. They have reported on this, albeit dishonestly, in Michigan by local establishment media outlets like the Detroit News and the Detroit Free Press, which are basically like the papers of record in the state. But they have not truly reported on this or done the investigations anywhere close to like what we've talked about here on this channel. And they have essentially enabled Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson to basically bury this investigation, bury all of the documented evidence and the various pieces that were ongoing so that she could help to establish and continue the organized election fraud that was taking place in Michigan. This is, in my opinion, one of the most well-documented cases of election fraud. And this rises above voter fraud because it is on a mass scale. You had members of the media in Michigan absolutely at every juncture downplay the statewide probe that was going on into GBI Strategies. It was only 1 month before the November 2020 election that it was launched, and it should have been front page news. But they had zero interest in truly examining or exposing the scope of the scheme that GBI Strategies and its employees were putting down in multiple cities, multiple municipalities where elections were clearly compromised by the injection of an as yet unknown volume of fraudulent voter registrations. And that is the reason why it's so key that Michigan's voter rolls get cleaned. But just keeping in mind, once again, they have been put on notice. We are aware of the GBI Strategies efforts. We are aware of exactly now which locations they were sending these fraudulent voter registrations into. And because you had the investigations by the FBI and multiple districts within the state of Michigan, all of that information, I believe, is in the hands of the Department of Justice, and I would imagine Harmeet Dillon specifically. Just to give you a brief overview of what happened, before the 2020 election, Michigan clerks were furious that Jocelyn Benson had told them to ignore signature matching on absentee ballots. This is illegal in the state of Michigan. It is a total violation. Not only was she breaking the law with this guidance to clerks, but she was also hiding this investigation into GBI Strategies, the largest voter registration fraud investigation in the history of the state of Michigan. And the clerks that were looking just to simply ensure the security and integrity of their elections were basically told to go pound sand. Now, Ann Meisch is the Muskegon clerk who initially contacted the Michigan Police Department that was the first to look into this on October 16th, 2020. But it appears that Ann Meisch was perhaps aware of the activities of GBI Strategies and these fraudulent voter registrations as early as October 5th, because it was October 5th where she shared this now famous image on the Michigan Clerk's Facebook page, and she was speaking with clerks all over the state about how many fraudulent voter registrations she got and the manner in which she was receiving them. Remember, they were being mailed in large batches. Now, from the Michigan State Police report on October 26th, so 10 days after Ann Meisch made her initial call, they recorded that Muskegon City Clerk Ann Meisch and the Deputy Clerk Kimberly Clark contacted the Muskegon Police Department after they noticed these irregularities on the voter registration applications. Meisch received, they say, a small quantity and then larger quantities of voter registration applications by mail from a female later identified as redacted. She is the one that we saw interviewed at a later date. It was found that this woman was working for the company called GBI Strategies, who also went by the name Empower Michigan, also known as EM in the report. So Meisch stated that, in her opinion, a quantity of the voter registration forms were highly suspicious and possibly fraudulent. Her opinion was based on the fact that numerous forms appeared to have been completed by the same writer, and upon initial examination, addresses on multiple forms were invalid or non-existent. Meisch investigated further and found that phone numbers on multiple forms were erroneous. Signatures on multiple forms did not match those on file with the Secretary of State. Examples included an address in the 7,000 block of Pine Street and another in the 600 block of Moffett Street. Those addresses do not exist in the city of Muskegon in their house numbering system. Another form listed 80 West Southern Avenue. That's the address for the Muskegon High School. It's clearly not a residence. Now, Meisch found that all the suspected fraudulent applications came from a single mailing address, Empower Michigan, at two locations, 24225 West 9 Mile Road in Southfield, Michigan, and 917 North Opdyke in Auburn Hills, Michigan. Both of them were locations where Empower Michigan were set up as their headquarters. Meisch stated that some of the initial forms were dropped off on October 8th by a black female who identified herself as redacted, stated she worked for Empower Michigan GBI Strategies, and they were registering voters and helped voters obtain absentee ballots. Mish told officers that this woman appeared reluctant to talk about specifics regarding the company and stated she would have to talk to her supervisor before answering any additional questions. Mish also estimated that Empower Michigan had delivered between 8,000 and 10,000 voter registration forms to the Muskegon City Clerk's office alone. She turned over only 42 suspected fraudulent applications to the officer investigating. Now, on October 20th, that was the deadline for in-person voter registration applications. They returned to the Muskegon Clerk's office to deliver additional registration forms in person, and Mish estimated this time they brought in an additional 2,500 forms. Mish contacted the Muskegon Police Department again and the detectives that were investigating. They conducted a non-custodial interview with initially provided a fictitious date of birth. It was discovered that they had a misdemeanor warrant issued by the Madison Heights Police Department that was beyond the pickup range. And the redacted individual told detectives, again, she worked for GBI Strategies, and it was employed by the owner, Gary Bell. Gary Bell is still a ghost, by the way, guys. The person dropping off the registration said she was hired in Michigan in August of 2020, was being paid $1,150 per week to find unregistered voters and provide them a form so they could get registered to vote or obtain their absentee ballot. She then stated she worked in different areas of Michigan and provided a rental car and lodged in local hotels. She initially told investigators that canvassers are paid for each form that is delivered, but then later stated they were paid hourly no matter how many forms they turned in. So which is it? She also stated that canvassers are paid through a reloadable pay card, stated that GBI has done work in Muskegon, Detroit, Ypsilanti, Southfield, Flint, and Lansing. So the Michigan State Police, as you may remember, raided GBI Strategies and Empower Michigan headquarters in Southfield, Michigan. The stuff they found inside is very different than what was reported by local news outlets like the Detroit News. And the reporter for Detroit News is Craig Mauger. He's basically, instead of investigating what the police actually found, he instead took a blank statement from the press secretary for Michigan's Democratic Attorney General, Dana Nessel, and Dana Nessel's office highly and significantly downplayed the actual investigation itself, but also the contents of Empower Michigan's location. Craig never reported that he asked anyone from the Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson's office for a statement on this investigation. But the thing is, both the Attorney General and the Secretary of State's office were doing concurrent investigations on this case to look into exactly what it was that GBI Strategies was doing. Is he a journalist, or is he merely a mouthpiece for the state of Michigan? I think that the latter is obvious. So why did the Detroit News help Attorney General Dana Nessel, a Democrat, minimize the impact of GBI Strategies' statewide operation? Because it obviously had an effect in the 2020 election. If we're looking at 68 different jurisdictions where they were handing in voter registrations, and we go with an average of 12,000 applications for new voters in each jurisdiction, I need to pull up my calculator. 12,000, we'll say, times 68, that's 816,000 voter registrations. And, of course, Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson said, do not check signature matching. Well, that would mean that they would simply accept all of those voter registrations and produce a ballot for each individual. And, of course, they would go on the voter rolls. So it seems strange that Craig would not have any more of a journalistic interest in wondering whether or not what GBI Strategies was doing could have potentially had an effect on the election in Michigan. It seems strange that Craig would not ask for a statement from the Secretary of State, Jocelyn Benson, who is, of course, the top elections official in the state of Michigan. And, of course, now the Democrat Party candidate for governor in Michigan. She will be in the general election. They also really carefully phrased things in the article that he wrote. He called GBI Strategies' efforts attempted fraud. He also said, without providing any evidence, that the fraud was caught. and that applicants were not added to the state's voter rolls because Michigan's election system worked. All of these things are patently false and totally ridiculous. There is no proof that these people did not end on the voter rolls. And of course, it's much more likely that they did, given the fact that they were not supposed to check signature matching. So anyways, during the course of his investigation, the journalist referring to this was actually put in touch with another individual from the Attorney General's office, and they said that the investigation was taken over by the FBI, not because the FBI wanted to take it over, but because Dana Nessel, the Attorney General, requested it, probably because she didn't want to have anything to do with it. Then she would be forced to make some sort of a statement to the voters of Michigan, and people already didn't trust the safety and security of the election. This is a portion from a reporter Craig Mauger's response to the Gateway Pundit when they truly broke this story. Nessel, and of course he didn't talk about it until Gateway Pundit talked about it. Nessel's press secretary, Danny Wimmer, said the total number of suspected fraudulent forms delivered to the Muskegon clerk by the individual was 8,000 to 10,000. No mention of the 2,500 additional that came at a later date. However, Wimmer said the attempted fraud was caught before Election Day because Michigan's election system worked and the applicants were not added to the state voter rolls. The city clerk in Muskegon detected the fraudulent material provided and alerted the proper authorities, Wimmer said. A thorough investigation was conducted by multiple agencies within the state, and no successful fraud was perpetrated upon the state's election process or qualified voter file. Well, if somebody attempted to commit election fraud or voter fraud, then that would mean that they should be prosecuted. But of course, as we know, the Attorney General prosecuted no one in this case. So the receipts are clear. Fraud happened. It was allowed to happen, and everybody got away with it. Now, there was, of course, a FOIA request done by Yehuda Miller, who has since received all of the ballots and the envelopes from Wayne County and Detroit. And he was able to obtain a series of documents from the U.S. Postal Service that confirm that GBI Strategies and Empower Michigan's fraudulent voter registration scheme was not limited to Muskegon. They only mention Muskegon, of course, in that article. And if we take a look at those U.S. Postal Service receipts, we find that GBI Strategies sent a minimum of 104 packages to at least 9 cities throughout Michigan. The receipts show that they were sent to 68 different cities across Michigan, which include the largest, like Detroit, Dearborn, Benton Harbor, Flint, Southfield, Ypsilanti, Muskegon, Grand Rapids, Holland, Pontiac, and Inkster. Take a look at this. You've got 45 cities that received one shipment from GBI Strategies. You've got 11 cities that received 2 shipments. Then you've got 11 more cities that received 3 shipments. And then in Flint, they received 4 shipments from GBI Strategies. Each of those shipments would be a tranche of documents. So if we look at internal GBI Strategies documents and handwritten notes by the staff that were included to the FOIA fulfillment that was given to Yehuda Miller, it shows the location of multiple small, medium-sized, and large cities across Michigan. And you can see here, they took extensive notes because they wanted to make sure they hit everything. The documents show over 22 cities received 2, 3, or more different shipments. As I said, Flint received 4. The shipments were date staggered, so the clerk's offices may not catch on to what they were doing. And some of these cities were sent so many applications, GBI Strategies had to use medium flat rate boxes. They're about 6 inches tall, and that would mean that you could fit 1,400 pages inside that box. So that's, at a minimum, one box, 1,400 fraudulent voter registration applications or duplicate voter registration applications. GBI Strategies obviously did not want to drop these things off in person if they could help it, because the more likely you are to draw attention to yourself, the more likely you are to have all of these voter registration applications questioned by a watchful eye. And the majority of these 68 clerk locations are not far from their offices or where the field staff is located. So theoretically, they could have very easily walked these down and just handed them in. The packages from Empower Michigan included the return address of 917 North Opdyke. This is their location at a Staybridge Suites extended stay hotel. GBI Strategy staff would certainly check out of that hotel before Election Day. And it was reported that GBI was operating out of at least a dozen hotels. They were using them as office hubs. And they did this from Iowa all the way down to Florida. Michigan was not the only place. They do have a corporate office, and that's at 24255 West 9 Mile Road in Southfield. This is the location that was raided by the Michigan State Police in late October after this crime was put on the radar of the Michigan State Police. Also, keep in mind that U.S. Senate candidate Gary Peters, who is currently a U.S. Senator, he voted against holding Anthony Fauci in contempt, and presidential candidate at that time, Joe Biden, he and both of them were paying GBI Strategies for their voter registration work in Michigan for the 2020 election, and both Democrat candidates had a miraculous showing in the election. Remember, in the middle of the night, boom, you had giant tranches of ballots that just showed up. Melissa Carone, Dominion Voting Systems whistleblower, she saw firsthand all of those vans coming in the night. We've shown the videos from the security cameras in the middle of the night, well after the ballot drop-off time. They came in with all of these ballots, which had no chain of custody. Is it reasonable to assume that the ballots that were printed as a result of the fraudulent voter registrations from GBI Strategies and Empower Michigan could account for all of those ballots that showed up when they were needed? Now, shortly after Gateway Pundit broke the story about GBI Strategies initially, a whistleblower contacted them and provided them with access to the Michigan Clerk's Facebook page, which is how we get all of these images that we've shown in the past. This is a private Facebook group, so unless you are a Michigan City clerk working for the elections division, you're not going to have access to it. So clearly, a clerk that was concerned about the election fraud gave the information and all of the screenshots to the good people at Gateway Pundit. So as they were discussing all of this, they knew that most of these things were fraudulent, and they talked about it amongst themselves. They admitted that they were having forms incorrectly filled out because of these pushy canvassers. These people that were bringing in these voter registration forms made the clerks feel uncomfortable and made them feel as if they were obligated to fill out the forms. So rather than having an uncomfortable conversation, they filled them out in somebody else's name just to get the canvasser away from them without giving them real info. And that means that these people were probably concerned about being called racist or being called prejudiced or having some other ist or phobe labeled on them. Another clerk reported she received 12 new voter registrations from GBI, and they were all signed with an X. The clerk said they had no ID. They had the same out-of-town mailing address for each. She said they were all suspicious, but it wasn't suspicious enough to turn them over to police. Yes, how weak. This is how these people are successful, you guys. Not everybody who allows these things to happen are evil, but weakness is a strong motivator for a lot of people. They would just rather not rock the boat and allow the election to be stolen. And then another clerk said she received GBI Strategies fake registrations through priority mail. She said some had no name filled out, some had no social security number, some had no driver's license number, and plenty of them were already previously registered. So the key suspect in the GBI Strategies case that we've seen interviewed by the Michigan State Police that was caught dropping off these thousands of registrations in Muskegon had a warrant for her arrest. And she was picked up by the Michigan State Police. They were following her. They interrogated her. And the investigator working for the Michigan Attorney General, Dana Nessel, also was part of the interrogation. And during the course of the interrogation, both the suspect and the investigator for the Michigan Attorney General can be heard confirming that there is no way clerks in large cities are able to identify the fraudulent registrations now that Senator Peters and President Biden's campaigns were funding them. Several of the Michigan clerks in that group chat revealed actual conversations they were having, and they said it looks like the same person wrote the address label on mine. Who do we report this to? Unfortunately, no one in the clerk group suggested that they contact the police or the FBI. They were just basically couldn't be bothered to do it. So anyways, when President Trump gave his address on July 17th, he tasked the Department of Justice to reopen this investigation into GBI Strategies. He didn't specifically say GBI Strategies, but everything he was describing, we knew that that's what he was talking about. He did mention the reporting by the Gateway Pundit on the statewide investigation that began in Muskegon and then spread throughout the entire state. So it's not too late for an investigation to be done, because I believe that GBI Strategies has remained in operation this entire time. So did GBI Strategies continue with the same behavior that was successful for them in the past? If people were paying for them to continue doing it, I would say the chances are pretty good. But again, only time will tell. We wait anxiously to see if the Department of Justice is going to find evidence of criminal wrongdoing and bring charges against people for their blatant mishandling and corruption of our election system. All right, now from Michigan, we're going to jump to another familiar location, Maricopa County, Arizona. The Crucible, thank you very much for rating the stream. Also, Principled Enigma says, Starlink is my internet. Local storms are probably creating the lockups. That sounds reasonable. Hang on, is this Andrew Wilson that's rating my stream? I need to figure out. Holy shit. It is Andrew Wilson that rated my stream. Thank you very much, Andrew Wilson, for rating my stream. That's pretty freaking sweet. All right. I appreciate you, buddy. All right. Now, when the White House released these documents on the 2020 election, I think a lot of us were very excited, okay, because it meant for the very first time, the President of the United States was actually publicly admitting to everybody, not just with insinuations, but with evidence, that our election system is hopelessly broken, that our election system is so perverse that criminals quite literally run it. And the first step to fixing that perverse, that broken system is to present the evidence to the American people and demand that the current law enforcement officials and investigators take action on that evidence. In one of those documents that President Trump released, there were details that we previously did not have about an incident that took place in Maricopa County. Now, when this incident took place, we reported on it after the 2020 election. But when you hear the specifics of it, my God, it's going to really, really enrage you. Grease Monkey, thank you very much for joining as a member over on Rumble. So, these newly declassified documents relate to a hacker that was able to gain access to approximately 633,000 records of voters in Maricopa County. Now, that includes publicly available information, but it also includes information on 930 voters that was not publicly available in any respect. That includes detailed information about domestic abuse victims, and that all comes from a letter that was just released by FBI Director Kash Patel and the White House Task Force on Government Transparency. So according to an interview from November 2020 with a redacted man, the hacker believed he had extracted somewhere between 1 and 2 million files, estimated to be roughly 4 gigabytes of data, using a PowerShell script to exploit the Maricopa County Recorder's website. Now, Maricopa County reported this intrusion through the Arizona Counterterrorism Center on November 2nd. Of course, Election Day was November 3rd, and the incident was being circulated amongst federal election security officials. The subject in question attempted to eliminate the locally and remotely stored copies before the FBI executed their search warrant. He tried to cover his tracks. And the U.S. Attorney's Office in the District of Arizona, the then Republican-led Attorney General of Arizona, the Maricopa County District Attorney, and the Pinal County District Attorney, they all declined to prosecute the hacker, despite the fact they had evidence and a confession from the hacker that, yes, he had illegally hacked into Maricopa County's election system and stolen nearly 700,000 voter records, including non-public information. Now, in this interview that was done by the FBI, okay, in 2020, the hacker acknowledged that he knew what he did that was wrong and it was illegal. He knew he was going to be visited by law enforcement. So in that knowledge, he deleted and reformatted all of his hard drives, and he also deleted his Google Cloud data. So he attempted to cover his tracks. He confessed to the destruction of evidence while seeming to acknowledge that he was aware he had committed a crime. He had 100% consciousness of guilt, but no one wanted to investigate. The U.S. Attorney decided not to investigate. The Arizona Attorney General decided not to investigate. The Maricopa County Attorney decided not to investigate. And the Pinal County Attorney decided not to investigate. Now, in 2020, in December, we first learned that the FBI agents had raided the home of a man by the name of Elliot Kerwin. Elliot Kerwin was a 56-year-old IT expert living in the area. At the time, we did know or believe that investigators were looking for evidence of a cyber attack on an unnamed organization and stolen voter data. Now, we considered at that time, perhaps this was related to the election. Perhaps this was related to Maricopa County, the largest county in the state of Arizona. One of these declassified reports we now have appears to focus on that incident involving Elliot Kerwin in Fountain Hills. This is a town located in Maricopa County. However, for some reason, Kerwin is not mentioned specifically by name in these released documents. The American public at that time was left to speculate the extent of what Kerwin was able to do when he penetrated the Maricopa County Recorder's voter registration infrastructure. I wonder what Stephen Richer has to say about this, the safest and securest election in the history of America back in 2020. Remember how dismissive Stephen Richer was of any possible breaches of election equipment or election systems? Reporting at that time told us that there was never any access to the election management system or to the tabulation systems, and that the voter information he was able to extract was all publicly available. But now the newly released Election Day records raise questions about the government's public messaging during and following the 2020 election. Federal election security officials were internally aware of an intruder that had exploited a Maricopa County website and exposed hundreds of thousands of voter records. But there are no contemporaneous public acknowledgement of this particular incident from CISA that has ever been identified. And why would there be? Because CISA was part of the PSYOP to convince America that the 2020 election was so safe and secure, you could basically build a bridge on top of it. That omission is significant because federal and industry election officials then declared through Chris Krebs, who was the director of CISA, that the 2020 election was the most secure in American history. You know, safe and secure, and then they came out later with safe and effective. It's all the same type of narrative messaging. However, despite knowing that there was 633,000 records hacked and stolen, and the suspect having believed it was 1 to 2 million records, they knew that it was not safe. They knew that it was not secure. They knew that something had happened, and it was on them to tell the American people. But no one can say for sure exactly how many he took because, again, he deleted all the files. He knew he was going to get a visit from the FBI. Elliot Kerwin sought to cover his tracks. So the question is now whether or not these documents prove the election results were altered. We don't know. It doesn't matter. The question is why a confirmed breach involving approximately 633,000 voter records, which included hundreds of sensitive records, apparently was not enough for anybody to take any action. was not enough to alert the public to any form of disclosure, and it was not enough to ever prosecute the guy who confessed to the actions himself. Elliot Kerwin got away with it. Can you guys imagine if this was any other situation? If this was something that was done, a bank gets hacked and they steal 633,000 bank records. That person would be going to prison. But of course, the election, we've got to continue to pretend that this was the safest and securest election in the history of elections. They lied to us. They lied to us, and they did it on purpose, and they knew. There have been so many hacks where people have been prosecuted, but this one, 4 different jurisdictions decided that it wasn't enough to rise to the level of prosecution. The day before the most important and consequential election of the modern age. Yep. Of course, if they had admitted it, then they couldn't have continued with the narrative of the safe and secure election. People might have thought even more that Joe Biden was not truly elected, or even more that Donald Trump had the election stolen from him. Both were true. Joe Biden didn't deserve to be president. Donald Trump did have the election stolen from him. And, of course, they had to keep the ruse going. All right. Now, we're going to transition to some conversation on immigration for the last portion of the show. First of all, as you know, Amy Klobuchar is running as the Democrat candidate for governor in the state of Minnesota. Mike Lindell is going to be the Republican candidate. He has just resigned his position as CEO of MyPillow so that he can devote 100% of his time to running as the Republican candidate. Amy Klobuchar was doing a event with Minnesota farmers, and she said out loud that she was a strong advocate of U.S. border security, and the crowd erupted in laughter.
Amy? I've long believed and supported funding for order at the border, and I have worked well with law enforcement in Minnesota for years. But what I... Quiet. Wow.
Amy? I can't believe people just started laughing at her, but I mean, it makes sense. It's on brand. She is not pro-border. She is not pro-security. It's so funny. All right, we also have a wonderful announcement on immigration from President Trump. He just signed earlier today in the Oval Office 2 major executive orders which will disqualify large amounts of illegals from receiving birthright citizenship. And he did it using the language of the Supreme Court's own recent ruling on birthright citizenship with the 14th Amendment. Stephen Miller said that includes, for example, alien enemies of the United States, members of foreign terrorist organizations, and large categories of people who lobby and act on behalf of foreign governments. This ensures that large numbers of people who wrongly would be getting birthright citizenship will no longer be eligible for those benefits. Let's take a listen.
And we're not going to let it happen. So, Steve, if you will, please.
Yes, so today the President signed these 2 executive orders here relating to birthright citizenship and birth tourism. As the President mentioned, the 14th Amendment was passed exclusively in the aftermath of the Civil War so to ensure that the children of slaves would be citizens. It had no other meaning and purpose outside of that. And that's been clear, obviously, since the day that it was passed. You can go back and you can read the congressional debates. This is not something that's even seriously contested by anybody. The President is using his authority as Commander-in-Chief to sign first an executive order using the new ruling the Supreme Court issued to expand the definitions of people who are ineligible for birthright citizenship. That includes, for example, alien enemies of the United States, members of foreign terrorist organizations, and large categories of people who lobby and act on behalf of foreign governments. And so with taking this action, it ensures that large numbers of people who wrongly would be getting birthright citizenship will no longer be eligible for those benefits. The second action that he's taking, which is especially historic, is for the first time ever in American history to ban birth tourism. So I want you to really let that sink in. This has been something that people have talked about not only for years, but for decades. The idea that people come here pretending to be a tourist, pretending to be a visitor, saying they want to go to Disneyland, they want to go visit a monument or go to a national park, but the real reason they're here is to have a child, to make that child an automatic citizen, leave our country, and then have a U.S. citizen child. It gives them access under this broken system to welfare benefits, ultimately to the voting booth, and all the other rights and privileges that belong solely to Americans. So that practice of birth tourism is, as of the signing of this order, hereby banned. And what that means is that no one in the world is any more allowed to obtain a visa for this fraudulent purpose. It is probably, and President Trump has done many historic things on immigration, too many to list now, sealed the southern border shut, record deportations, record integrity, stopping foreign terrorist entry, record reduction in drug seizures, dismantling criminal cartels, dismantling the gangs, right? Everything he's done that has been so unprecedented. I would put this in the top 3 in terms of importance because it ends what has been one of the gravest and most egregious abuses of the American system, and it keeps American citizenship sacred.
Thank you. Okay?
Mr. President?
That's big stuff. That's a big deal.
Mr.
Bruce, go ahead.
Thank you. On the birth tourism executive order, what are the plans for enforcement in terms of cracking down on birth tourism hotels that's common in parts of
We're
California?
cracking down very big crackdowns, and this will give us the right to do it in a much more forceful manner. But they've taken birthright citizenship and they've made a joke out of it. And we're actually the only country of size, I think just about the only country, period, that does birthright citizenship. I thought we were going to win it at the Supreme Court. Unfortunately, we had a bad decision, very unfair decision. Our country suffers because of it, and we're ending it a different way.
All right, so this is really good news. It will immediately take a huge swath of the global population that comes here to have babies and make them ineligible to be given citizenship. So I'm very, very happy that this is happening, but I don't know that it will be enough. I still think we need legislation from Congress specifically addressing this, and that would essentially lock it up. But this will be a good place to start, and it will direct the DOJ in going after people specifically. Now, I've got a couple of stories for you that are from the mainstream media, hoping to take your pity and your empathy and twist it, perverting it, and using it against you. Here we have a story about a woman who entered the United States lawfully in October of 2021. She came here as a tourist. She overstayed that visa, and now she's been arrested and she's been detained by ICE. This woman was given a work permit. She was given a California Real ID, and she was given free health insurance. Now, her daughter and her lawyer are speaking to the media and saying she should not have been arrested. She should be released. But the fact that she was here illegally means that she should be arrested. But the fact that she was given a real ID by the state of California means that she may have been able to cast a ballot. Of course, that is all that would be required. Let's take a listen.
They did not just put the handcuffs on her, they also put chains on her. And she was telling me that it was hurting really hard, and she was asking them to loose the chains a bit. They didn't do it.
Okay, that sucks. I'm sorry about that. But why did she overstay her tourist visa? Why didn't she get some other visa? Why didn't she go through the process of becoming a naturalized U.S. citizen? Why wasn't there some other means that she employed to stop herself from breaking U.S. immigration law? Because as far as I'm concerned, that is the only thing that matters. That's it. And she didn't do it. And here we are 5 years later, and she's been in the United States of America receiving all of the benefits, most likely that citizens might receive if the state of California had offered them to U.S. citizens, but they probably didn't get because the state of California was too busy giving free health care and benefits to an illegal alien.
Sunnyvale resident Daria Soboleva is talking about her mom. 59-year-old Alevtina Soboleva is now in ICE custody at this facility in southern Louisiana after she was arrested by ICE officers at the Buffalo Niagara International Airport as she and her daughter were wrapping up a trip to Niagara Falls.
Look at that. She was traveling from the United States of America to an international destination. You know what's hilarious to me about this? The only reason ICE is in airports is because of the Democrats. Okay? They basically forced the issue, and ICE ended up having to go after the shutdown and take over at airports to ensure that people would be able to continue flying, and then they just never left. It's like they got their toe in the door, and they stayed there, and then they decided, hey, this is probably a good place we can start looking for people who aren't citizens, who are just flying freely around the United States. Remember, during the Biden years, I've told you guys this story so many times, every flight I had to take was chock full of stinky illegal aliens who didn't have to show an ID, who just showed a piece of paper to the TSA agent and was allowed to get onto the airplane. They didn't have to do the biometrics. They took pictures of my irises. They scanned my driver's license. They wanted to see my boarding pass. But these people, they got free airfare and they got to go all around the country, wherever the hell they wanted to go.
She's very, very, very responsible, and I'm responsible.
But not responsible enough to get legal. That's irresponsible.
So to me, this is a shock. I don't know what happened because we did everything right.
In October of 2021, Alevtina came from Moscow on a 6-month visa to visit her daughter at her Sunnyvale home.
Now, if I went to Russia on a 6-month visa and I overstayed for any length of time, I guarantee you the Russian government would come and scoop my white ass up and put me on a plane back to the United States. They would deport me quickly. Russia does not play around with illegal aliens.
But before the 6 months was out, Moscow invaded Ukraine. Her immigration attorney says she then applied for asylum, having spoken out against the invasion.
People cannot go back to their countries because they are seeking asylum and they are in danger. Alevtina can't go to prison if she goes to Russia.
But the asylum process can take as long as a decade.
While you're waiting, you have a letter that says your presence in the United States is authorized. But nowadays, the current administration took the position that they can still take people like that into custody because their lawful presence in the United States expired.
I really hope that we can bring her home.
The thing about it is, if you are applying for asylum, you apply for asylum first. You don't come here on a tourist visa and then switch it up after you get here, because it shows that your true intention was never to come here for asylum. If she needed to apply for asylum in the United States, that would have been the first thing that she did, and she wouldn't have come here on a tourist visa and then wait for that to expire and then say, oh, you know what? Now that I don't want to go back to my home country, I'm going to go ahead and apply for asylum. It doesn't work that way. I'm sorry about the position you're in, but I don't have any sympathy for you because these are the laws, and if we don't enforce the laws, they mean absolutely nothing. And we've seen what that leads to. Here is an excellent example. These are illegals that were just busted in an operation targeting child sex offenders and exploitation crimes in Mississippi. The Department of Homeland Security announced the arrest of nearly 70 people across the state of Mississippi as a result of an operation targeting child exploitation offenders and previously convicted sex offenders. This was Operation Muddy Waters. It was going on over 2 weeks. It included child exploitation charges against illegal immigrants who allegedly crossed state lines so they could abuse children. The U.S. Attorney's Office in the Northern District of Mississippi announced the operation, which began on July 20th and ended on the 31st, was coordinated with federal, state, and local law enforcement agencies across the state. In total, Operation Muddy Waters led to 13 child exploitation arrests, 48 sex offender absconder arrests, 2 referrals to Louisiana and Colorado, 1 victim recovered, more than 8 search warrants, and more than 50 devices seized for forensics, and at least 3 immigration detainers being filed. U.S. Attorney Scott Leary said, when dealing with child exploitation cases, it's time to pause and reflect on why a government exists. Is it to protect and provide a better world for our children? Because everything else is secondary. Amen. I like this guy. This principle can be found in our Declaration of Independence, our founding document. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. The Declaration's vision is that of a universal, inalienable God-given rights. We are duty-bound to protect these rights, especially as they apply to our children. Under no circumstances can American society equivocate this duty. No rationalization, no ambiguity, no tempered response. Victimizing children is evil, and a civilized society cannot tolerate it. We will be absolutely relentless in our pursuit of those who seek to exploit our children. These crimes are an abomination. I want to thank those agencies that share this vision: the United States Attorney's Office for the Southern District of Mississippi, Homeland Security Investigations, the United States Marshal Service, the Mississippi Attorney General, the Mississippi Department of Public Safety, and the police departments and sheriff's offices who work with us. Together, we serve the citizens of this great state, and we work hard not to let you down. Matthew Rydell, Assistant Special Agent in charge of HSI Gulfport, added, "Those who choose to hide behind a computer screen to exploit children will not remain hidden." Operation Muddy Waters demonstrates HSI's unwavering commitment to protect children, support victims, and hold offenders accountable. We will continue working with our federal, state, and local partners to bring these crimes to light, pursue those responsible, and help prevent further harm. Attorney General for Mississippi, Lynn Fitch, noted, "For 2 weeks, federal, state, and local law enforcement have been working together to find the predators who hide in plain sight in our communities. And the outstanding number of arrests made during this operation point to the power of this partnership. But the most important number coming from this operation is the one child victim that was saved from a sextortion scheme in progress. The work done in this operation made all the difference to this child and to countless others who are a little bit safer online right now." Included in these arrests are Christian Abel Argueta Garan. He was an illegal migrant from Honduras who allegedly traveled from Tennessee to Mississippi for the purpose of engaging in illicit sexual conduct with a minor. Rahul Mandal, an illegal from Bangladesh on a student visa at the University of Alabama, who allegedly established communication with a 14-year-old male via social media. Enrique Bravo Gonzalez, an illegal migrant from Mexico who was allegedly a non-compliant sex offender who was previously convicted for felony sexual offense against a child in the United States in 2022. If it wasn't for these federal agencies upholding the law and doing their job, then it's very possible the child they rescued might have been further victimized, and many other children online might have been put into a position where they were victimized by these illegal aliens. Now, we have an announcement here from Secretary of State Marco Rubio. Every foreigner applying for a U.S. visa will now have to make their social media profiles public. That means they're not going to be able to hide behind a private account or only allow their friends to see what their beliefs are. The State Department will require full access to Twitter, X, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and any other social platform so that if people want to come to the United States, the State Department can review what they think, what they share, and who they associate with. The objective is to spot in advance those who may come and threaten the United States of America or betray the United States of America before they even have an opportunity to set foot on American soil. From the State Department memo, they said the department relies on all available sources of information during the visa review and verification process to identify applicants who may be inadmissible to the United States, including those who pose a threat to national security and public safety.
When you come to the United States as a visitor, which is what a visa is, which is how this individual entered this country, on a visitor's visa, okay, you are here as a visitor. We can deny you that visa. We can deny you that if you tell us when you apply, "Hi, I'm trying to get into the United States on a student visa. I am a big supporter of Hamas, a murderous, barbaric group that kidnaps children, that rapes teenage girls, that takes hostages, that allows them to die in captivity, that returns more bodies than live hostages." If you tell us that you are in favor of a group like this, and if you tell us when you apply for your visa, and by the way, I intend to come to your country as a student, and rile up all kinds of anti-Jewish student, anti-Semitic activities. I intend to shut down your universities. If you told us all these things when you applied for a visa, we would deny your visa. I hope we would.
And now we can look at everything they post. And if they're denigrating the United States of America, if they're saying things like F ICE, if they're saying Donald Trump is a criminal and shouldn't be the president, guess what? It's not your country. You can have those opinions, but you don't get to come to the United States if you believe in things that are going to subvert our efforts to make America a better place. Here's another one the media wants you to feel sorry for. Another pregnant illegal who was detained by ICE after returning from her Las Vegas vacation on her way back to Connecticut. So she's got enough money to go on a trip to Vegas, but she can't afford an immigration lawyer. She will also be deported.
A pregnant woman who was returning to Connecticut after vacationing in Las Vegas was picked up by 6 ICE agents at Harry Reid International Airport. Her fiance tells us he's distraught over the arrest and he's asking the U.S. government to release her. A pregnant woman...
No. The answer is no. She's here illegally. I don't care that she's got your baby in her. She doesn't get to stick around. Here's another one. CBS wants you to feel sorry for this guy. Now, he's a Republican. He's a Trump voter. Allegedly. 75-year-old man, John Gannon, lifelong Republican who voted for President Trump. But now he says he regrets this decision. Why? Because his fiance was an illegal alien. If you wanted her to be legal, then you should have married her sooner. If you wanted her to be legal, you should have helped her get the necessary paperwork to become an American citizen. So he says he regrets his decision because she got arrested by ICE in Houston.
I voted for Trump. I am saying that they are picking up law-abiding citizens. They're
not citizens. She's an illegal. She's not law-abiding. She's here in the country illegally. If she was a law-abiding citizen, then she would be a citizen of the United States of America. She's a citizen of another country. John, with all due respect, if you wanted her to be legal, you should have gotten married and you should have gone through the process to get her legal.
Destroying families, jobs.
None of that matters if they're not legal.
Gannon is a 75-year-old businessman and lifelong Republican who supported President Trump in 2024.
I wouldn't do that again. Not after this fiasco.
His fiancée, 45-year-old Venezuelan immigrant Yasmin Suarez-Reyes, was detained by ICE at George Bush Intercontinental Airport in Houston in late July.
I think she's a sugar baby. Let's just be honest. There's 30 years in between them. She was with him because of the money, and he was taking advantage of a situation.
8 ICE agents swarmed Jasmine and detained her, didn't tell us why, and rustled her off into a car.
When you saw that unfold, what went through your mind?
Well, I was just in total disbelief.
According to her immigration lawyer, Suarez-Reyes came to the U.S. legally in 2023 and later applied for asylum.
But how did she come to the United States legally? Again, did she come here on a tourist visa? She certainly didn't come here to apply for asylum because otherwise she would have applied for asylum when she got here. So again, this is not the proper order of operations. If you come to the United States of America on a tourist visa or on a work visa, and then it expires, and then you file for asylum, it doesn't count. It's obvious that you are merely trying to game the system.
A case that is still ongoing, but her underlying permission to be in the U.S. has lapsed. Some people may say this is what mass deportations look like.
They're not going after the hard guys.
We're going after the criminals, and I'm sorry, but your sugar baby was a criminal.
It's too difficult. It's easier to pick them up at the airport. You know, it's like shooting fish in a barrel.
Yep.
Suarez-Reyes was arrested as part of a recent crackdown by ICE at airports across the country.
ICE is here, help us!
Back in Texas, Gannon says he deeply misses his fiancée, who remains in ICE custody, facing deportation.
Jasmine's good as gold. Love Jasmine. That's it.
Now, she could have gotten a check for $2,600 and a flight back to Venezuela and then immediately applied for legalized citizenship here in the United States. Remember, that's what was supposed to happen. That's why the CBP Home app exists. If you loved her, bro, you would have done right by her. I am sorry that you were not thinking with your big brain.
Contacted the Department of Homeland Security about this case, but have yet to hear back. Immigrants like Suarez Reyes would typically not have been targeted for deportation and arrest under prior administrations. But the Trump administration has taken the position that anyone whose immigration status has lapsed is fair game for enforcement.
And that's exactly what we want. That is what we voted for. So again, I have no sympathy. And, you know, I'd say I'm sorry for you, bro, but like you should have seen this coming. All right, now, even beyond the illegals, legal immigration processings are falling even further than they have, lower than they were last year in 2025. Immigration applications received by the United States are down by 1/3, and completion is almost halved as USCIS ramps up scrutiny of those people applying for legal immigration. The denial rates have doubled or more for many parole requests and foreign employment categories. So you can see here, we have 33.6% fewer applications that have been received by USCIS quarter over quarter, 2026 versus quarter one, 2025. Fewer cases completed by 40%, same time period. Employment-based denials have spiked by 30.1% for EB-1 petitions, 52.5% for EB-1A, 57.4% for EB-2 NIW, and humanitarian and parole denials are way up as well. 88.7% spike for humanitarian parole, 45.8% for parole in place, and 46.7% for advanced parole applications. America is full. That's just the way that it works. Now, USCIS is also restoring some tools for their agents, the authority for their officers to deny immigration benefits, such as work authorization or change of status when an alien fails to provide sufficient evidence of their eligibility. This is obviously going to help them save time. It's going to help them avoid frivolous legal migration applications and people who are gaming the system. Benefit requesters should establish eligibility for an immigration benefit at the time they file a benefit request. If a benefit requester fails to demonstrate eligibility for a benefit or fails to provide all required initial evidence when filing an application, USCIS may deny their immigration benefit request without first issuing a request for evidence or a notice of intent to deny. It means that rather than having to go through 3 steps, they just boom, go through 1. All right. Now, finally, you guys may remember the case of young Sandra Birchmore. She was a 23-year-old woman in Massachusetts who was killed by a police officer. She was also with child. That child was the child of the police officer who killed her. She had been groomed since the age of 15 by former officer Matthew Farwell. Now, prosecutors are prosecuting Farwell. He is a former Staunton police officer in Massachusetts, and they have just announced a list of witnesses that they plan to call at his trial. Over 50 witnesses, I believe. Now, Matthew Farwell is accused of murdering Sandra Birchmore, a pregnant woman, in 2021. And these 50 witnesses they expect to testify in the case include members of law enforcement and roughly 12 experts. Farwell is accused of killing 23-year-old Sandra Birchmore and her unborn child to cover up their sexual relationship and the fact that he had groomed her since she was 15 years old. Not only, but it appears that he passed her around with other police officers. They also shared sexually explicit images of her, and they called her literally retarded when talking about how they had groomed her since the age of 15. What's really disgusting about this is that Sandra Birchmore started having sex with Officer Farwell when she was 15 years old because she was part of the Staunton Police Department's mentorship program. So Farwell took advantage of this 15-year-old girl who was supposed to be somebody that she could look up to, and he essentially groomed her to be his sexual slave, basically. Now, Matthew Farwell has a lot more coming up for him. Grant Smith Ellis is a great follow on X for deep dives into cases like this. The U.S. Department of Justice is about to present additional evidence in the case of the murder of Sandra Birchmore. And that evidence is that Sandra possessed information about child sex trafficking violations that Matthew and perhaps other police officers had been involved in. Duke says, Zach, the reason Fetterman didn't vote with the Republicans is because the Republicans would then be able to use a bipartisan vote in their fall ad camp. I mean, maybe, but I mean, at the end of the day, he should have done what was right. I don't care what stupid political reason he had for doing it. All right. So this information is gleaned from documents that were just released by the DOJ. So the DOJ seems to have evidence that Sandra was also aware of wire fraud violations and other violations of law that would prevent deprivation of rights under color of law by Matthew Farwell and perhaps other police officers in Stoughton. So this is coming from the DOJ's proposed jury instructions that they released this week. These are the relevant sections which prove these things are going to take place. In count 1, the defendant, Matthew Farwell, is charged with killing a witness or victim. Here, the witness or victim is alleged to be Sandra Birchmore. Federal law prohibits killing a witness or a person to prevent a communication to a federal law enforcement officer about the commission or possible commission of a federal offense. The government alleges that the federal offenses about which Sandra Birchmore possessed information are deprivation of rights under color of law in violation of Title 18 U.S.C. Section 242, coercion and enticement in violation of Title 18 U.S.C. Section 2422B, and wire fraud in violation of Title 18 U.S.C. 1343. And then the prosecutor says, I will define those underlying offenses later in my instructions so you understand the type of communication the government alleges the defendant acted to prevent. Title 18 U.S.C. Section 2422B states, whoever using the mail or any facility or means of interstate or foreign commerce or within the special maritime and territorial jurisdiction of the United States knowingly persuades, induces, entices, or coerces any individual who has not yet attained the age of 18 years to engage in prostitution or any sexual activity for which any person can be charged with a criminal offense or attempts to do so shall be fined under this title and imprisoned no less than 10 years or for life. So earlier this week, Grant Smith Ellis had also reported Jessica Hyde, Nick Garino, and Bodie Labs from the Karen Reed John O'Keefe trial. He's also done a lot of reporting on that. Are all cooperating federal witnesses in the Matthew Farwell Sandra Birchmore case. These are all people related to the police in this area. And there's a lot more. And this case goes on for days. I could probably talk about this for another hour if I wanted to. But I just thought that it would be good to suggest the relevance of the child sex trafficking and the murder of this possible witness to the police's actions in this area. This is some of the dirtiest, most corrupt police agencies in the country. And if you followed the Karen Reed trial, then you probably are already aware of that. Karen Reed was found innocent. They tried to frame her for the murder of her boyfriend, and they would stop at nothing to do that. So I have no doubt that they would stop at nothing to murder a young woman that had been molested and forced to engage in prostitution and acts of sexual coercion by police in this area of Massachusetts. Yeah, so if you want to take a look at this, I would highly recommend following Grant Smith Ellis. He's a great follow. Okay, let me see. No additional thank yous from Rumble. Over on Pilled, I need to say thank you to Judy the Lady Pug. Thank you very much for the cookie. Hugh65, thank you for the ship. He says, my contribution to dinner out. Filter Dog says, with a can, on Thursdays at 4 p.m. Eastern, Adel has a music show. It's worth watching. Okay, cool. Filter Dog with a can says, Bernie Sanders doesn't support Hong. Yeah, she's the one who wants to cancel Thanksgiving, but now she says Thanksgiving is her favorite holiday ever, and so she doesn't want to cancel it anymore. You know it's bad when the godfather of socialism won't support another socialist. Absolutely. And then Principled Enigma on Rumble says deportations are hot and hard rocks to stand on, but so is winning our independence in 1776. If we fail to get a handle on migration, we will lose 250 years of constitutional independence. You are correct, sir. All right, you guys, thank you for being here. Remember, there will be no show tomorrow. I have a funeral, and then my daughter is in town, so we're going to be spending the weekend together for her birthday. So please wish my daughter a happy birthday. Please hit the like button, and if you wouldn't mind, please check out the other sponsors of the program, which is going to be my friends over at onenessdrops.com, onenessdrops.com/redpill78. where you can get chlorine dioxide water purification kits. When you use Red Pill 78 or RP78, you'll get 15% off your order. They also have bundles where you can get a discount and then get an additional discount by using RP78 or Red Pill 78. Multiple formulations for chlorine dioxide, which is wonderful for a whole host of different things. Also, mullein extract for lung health, soursop extract for cellular regeneration, DMSO for aches and pains, and so much more. Also, don't forget about MyPillow.com. Use code RP78 to save up to 80% off of Mike Lindell's American-made products. My good friend Jordan over at ConsciousStrength.net. Use code RP78 to save 10% off. This is where I get my methylene blue. And looks like, I'm sorry, it's 15% off. And also, my friends over at TamarakGarden.com, use code RedPill78 and you'll get 10% off your order. My good friend Jessica over at GoAllGood.com, use code RP78 to get 10% off as well. And my friends over at RNCStore.com, use code RP78 to save 15% off their B17 products, bitter raw apricot seeds, and a whole host of other products that you will definitely want to check out. All of the links are in the description below. Every time you support a sponsor, a small amount will go to support my efforts to continue bringing you real news every single day. I hope everyone has a wonderful evening and a great weekend, and I will see you on Monday for another episode of Red Pill News Live. Good luck, and God bless. And why is that not working again? Hold on. That's crazy. Absolutely crazy. Wow.